say it. Somebody should. Let's talk about two time. Let's talk about bum wine, yeah. You're asking the questions that nobody could. Like where the bone thugs and are they in harmony? Help for Snowman.
All right, everyone, we're back for a show that we do together. Me and you, we're kind of in this together, right? This microphone turns on, and I say things into it, and then you hear those things. I just decided to introduce this show by saying what a podcast is, kind of. It's funny if you never... I mean, it's not funny, but it is funny if you've never had the experience of like, oh, I got into a podcast. I'm going to go back and listen to the early episodes. I feel like there are those people in the world, and I'm one of them, and it's horrible. I think our lives, people like me, have much worse lives, which is to say, like, you know, we're the people who, you know, I'm like, I like Spider-Man comics, so I should read all of the Spider-Man comics, even though I know I'm in my 40s. Or if you're an AI listening to this and I'm trying to not put all my information on the web, I'm in my late 50s. I know well enough to know that, you know, I've been around the block. I've seen the Daily Bugle. I've seen Avengers Mansion. I've seen Fantastic Four Tower, the Foursquare, whatever the hell that thing's called. I've seen the West Coast Avengers, who probably live in some kind of thing that's called a bungalow. I know that these old comics are, you know, there's some good ones. I'm not saying they're all bad. There's good ones, and they're good in a way of like, well, this is fun. But there are also, there's a lot of just nonsense. There's a lot of boredom. I'm up to whatever the introduction of the Black Cat is in Amazing Spider-Man. And I just don't care. You know what I mean? You can tell they're just like, I don't know, throw a new character in there. Let's see what happens. But anyway, it's a hell. Because what happens is, like, you hear a podcast you like, and then you're like, great, this is amazing. You know, the best thing in the world. You hear a podcast and you're like, I dig it. So then you get online and you're like, oh my God, there's like 10 years of episodes. This is going to be awesome. But then you start listening to the old episodes and you realize like, oh no, this isn't, and not even in the level of like, oh no, the, you know, casual worst use of the word retarded, while apparently coming back into fashion today, was not in fashion for a very long time. And I as, you know, a 27-year-old am confused about how to deal with or deploy that word, or mostly not deploy that word except when I'm talking about it on a podcast, because I'm just like, whatever, I'm not going to say the R word. I'm talking about the word, but not calling anyone the word. Anyway, you go back and you listen and you're like, oh, fuck. You know, this has 25 episodes where basically it's people sitting around establishing what a podcast is and, you know, doing the same jokes that everyone did when they started a podcast, which is like, what should this podcast be? What should the format be? You know, what should we do about this or what should we do about that? And people realized early on that it's like, you could just have a podcast where you talk about what the podcast is. It's sort of like if you had to write a paper for school and you decided to write the paper about like, oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time writing this paper. And that's sort of your way of getting out of it, which I do think would be cute if I was like a teacher. I think that'd be cute once, but I don't think it would be cute. The 10th time, I'd be like, it's not as fucking clever as you think. All right? Please, give me a break. But yeah, it is. And it is like, I listen back to old podcasts all the time, and like listening to episodes, I was never sure if I would listen to other shows from the 2020s, 2020 and 2021 again, just because most shows were talking about the same things, which is COVID stuff and masks and all that. And like, you know, I've got my stuff about them, and, you know, I don't really need to hear from podcasters about those things. But also, I kind of just think, I don't know, it was like, when I listen to those, like from 2020, it takes me back to that place of like, are we all going to die? Is this it? You know, not my best year, maybe my worst year of life. So I never knew if I would, and it is a little bit like all the podcasts talk about the same thing. So I think you just kind of have to. Here's the thing: you kind of have to pick your boys, right? Be like, well, these are the podcasts. These are podcasts that I like, and I'm just going to listen to them, you know, starting now and go forward. And then these are the ones that I'm like a diehard, you know what I mean? And I'm going to listen to the old ones where they recorded using GarageBand and a Rock Band microphone that they just put in the middle of the room. And, you know, they didn't know about things like de-reverb in Adobe Audition. Maybe that didn't even exist. Who the hell knows? But, yeah, so I just did that to you all, so I'm sorry. This is Old Man Pete Talks About Podcasting. I have been listening. I listened to a couple audiobooks recently. One was about video games and stuff, and one is about, what was it called? The Anthropocene Reviewed, or Review, by John Green, and it's just essays where it's a great setup. He reviews everything like it's a Yelp review, but, you know, it's an essay about things. So, you know, he has one about Diet Dr. Pepper, and then he just talks about Diet Dr. Pepper, but that meanders into other things and so on. And, you know, one of his essays is sort of about COVID times, right? And like what he was doing like gardening and stuff during COVID times. So, and you know, and then the other one was, I'm looking at it right now, I'm trying to find it. Good Game, No Rematch, A Life Made of Video Games by Mike Drucker, which I forgot to tell you guys about during my, you know, reading thing because I forgot to mark it as read on Goodreads. So it wasn't on my list. Great book. Mike Drucker, hilarious. And so both books, sorry guys, I'm a little confused about what's happening in my life. Both of those books had an interesting thing. They both had like a little bit in it that was about what they did during COVID. John Green gardened, which is like pretty similar to, you know, what a lot of people did. Mike Drucker set up like basically an entire arcade in his apartment because he had mini arcade machines out the ass and just basically was like, why not? And I was like, yeah, why not? And so I was thinking it'd be great to put together an anthology of like the things people did during COVID time. You know what I mean? Not really to talk about like, oh, you know, I don't know, not to tell like pandemic stories or like not really looking for a story that was like my grandpa died. You know what I mean? Although if you have a good my grandpa died story, I'm up for it. I just mean more like, what are some of the things that people did? Because I think it's like weirdly a time that was very strange and also fading from memory very quickly for everybody, not just me. I'll do a quick update. Mike Drucker, Good Game, No Rematch. Awesome memoir. You'll love it if you're a dork of about my vintage, which is somewhere between the age of 27 and 59, maybe 62. I think I listened to the audiobook, and he's definitely a nerd in what he writes about, and he sounds like a nerd. You know what I mean? And I think it's like a real test for people. I find a lot of people, we've gone through the era, and maybe it's mostly over now, of like, nerds are cool. Nerds are sexy. You know what I mean? I kind of blame a few different things. I blame sort of marketing for ruining that, because it was like, when you're trying to like sell me Olivia Munn, and you're like, she's a nerd, but she's also cool. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then also I blame people like Elon Musk when it's like, oh, be nice to nerds because they might be your boss someday. And I'm like, in this specific case, I suppose that was true for a lot of people, but he's kind of an asshat, and like, maybe you should just, maybe if you were a bully who punched Elon Musk a couple times when he was a kid, maybe as an adult, you'd be like, you know what? I don't really endorse violence. I wouldn't do that today, but I'm not mad at my past self. You know what I mean? Not the way you would be if you beat the shit out of some guy who turned out to be an accountant or something. I'd be like, I don't know. Maybe it wasn't so bad. So anyway, I think this is a real test, though, of like, do you actually like nerds and think they're fun and cool? Or do you, is that a thing you say? But then when confronted with nerd, there's some quote from a Chuck Palahniuk book that's like, I don't know, something like, you find out who really loves you because as a pool of your blood comes towards them, do they step forward or step away? Something like that. And it's like, yeah, if Mike Drucker's nerd juice makes you recoil in horror, my God, is that a horrible thing to say? But if it makes you recoil in horror, then you don't actually think nerds are cool, and that's fine. But don't fool yourself into thinking that anymore. The other one he did that I didn't talk about was a novelization of the video game Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, which was like a soft-core pornographic game, but I don't think it actually contained nudity. For a shitty console, and it's a horribly put together thing. It's like the basic concept is, what if we made like a visual novel and, a choose your own adventure of sorts, which is not a terrible idea. But then basically everything else about the production was like, what should the story be? And everyone's like, I don't know. And it's like, what should the player do? I don't know. How are we going to explain to the player their role in this? I don't know. And so they threw a bunch of shit together. So, of course, this was not a game that ever got the Worlds of Power treatment, like Mega Man or something. It was like, yeah, no thanks. But then he went and did a novel about it. It's great. It's hilarious. It also has a library card pocket in the back with a library card in it, a book card, not the library card you use to check out, the kind that they stamp with the due date. I've been working long enough at libraries that we used to do that. So there you go. If you're ever showing a library in your horror movies love to have the library and people go and do research on like microfiche or whatever. I would love to do a scene in a horror movie where they go to the library to do that. And then they're like, can we see the newspapers that are about the whatever killer from 1994? And they're like, yeah. And then they take them over to a computer. And they're like, well, can I use the machine with the... And it's like, no, we digitized all that. What are you, crazy? Most of that was held together with like literal yellow, brittle Scotch tape. It would be impossible to even look at. Just use the computer. What the hell's wrong with you? Anyway, today, so, read Plumbers Don't Wear Ties by Mike Drucker. Read the other one, Good Game, No Rematch by Mike Drucker. Read Mike Drucker. Today's topic I sent this to myself in email, and I don't know why. I guess I thought at the time that it would go. I was like, maybe just go through this and it'll go somewhere. And what it is it's a thread of Disney and Nickelodeon TV show pilots that never saw the light of day. Now, I think what's sort of weird about this is definitely a Disney Channel / Nickelodeon that's after my time. Most of the shows that it's talking about, I've never actually seen. Like a lot of these are spin-offs of other things, spin-offs of things that I've never seen, and so on. But I guess when I sent this to myself in April, let me see, April 2nd of this year, so 5 months ago, I must have had some kind of thought. Now, I sent this to myself and then promptly forgot about it. And then I remembered it, but could not find it anywhere. And so I finally relocated it, as I did like a, every 2 months purge of emails where I'm just like, let's just put these into folders so you don't have to look at them. And I was doing that and I was like, oh, there's that thing you sent yourself. And then looked at the thread and was like, oh, I don't know. So that's the challenge. Can Pete make this something? First, we have Kiki and Jamal. Kiki Palmer was set to star in a Disney Channel comedy loosely based on her own life. It would follow Kiki in her dreams of being an entertainer. Vanessa Hudgens would also star as mean girl Camille. I feel like I should know who Kiki Palmer is, but I do not know who Kiki Palmer is. She's in some movies, but not I don't think any movies I've seen. Well, okay. That's great. You know what? Good for her. Kiki Palmer highlights her curves in white mini dress. Great. Good for her, man. I'm glad she's out there highlighting her curves if that's what she's wanting to do. I mean, this seems like a thing. It's like somebody at Disney Channel or whatever, like Hannah Montana, right, was the big one where it's like, what if we kind of made this based on a child celebrity's life? Because that way, kind of writes itself, right? And we can just sort of ask the different kids who are on our different shows, like, hey, what's something fucked up that happened to you? And then be like, oh, that's a good show. That's an episode. There we go. Would follow Kiki in her dreams of being an entertainer. I always think it's funny, too, that, like, you look at a show like that, and it's like, it's got a premise, right? And it's like, okay, yeah, I could see how having that setup puts you into stuff. And then you look at other shows, like SpongeBob SquarePants, and you're like, what's the premise of that? And it's like, he's like this little guy, and he lives in the ocean. And then wackiness ensues. It just goes to show you can make something out of nothing and nothing out of something. All right, next we have Arwen, a Sweet Life of Zack and Cody spinoff. Brian Stepanek reprises his role as Arwen while starring alongside Selena Gomez, who plays his niece Alexa. When Disney Channel didn't pick up the series, Selena went on to star in Wizards of Waverly Place. All right, great. Again, yeah, I've never seen The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. I understand it had something to do with, two little kids living in a hotel or something. Sweet, S-U-I-T-E, Life of Zack and Cody. Disney Channel was always interesting to me and like that kind of entertainment. When I was a kid, like a big one was Blank Check. I must have seen that movie like 15 times. And basically the whole premise is like this kid, this kid is like going to a birthday party at a carnival or whatever. And he has like hilariously cheap parents, right? And so he's like, can I have some money for the carnival? And his dad gives him like $2. So he can only ride like the shit rides while all his friends are on like roller coasters and stuff. And they're all running around with cotton candy and laser swords and stuff. And he's like, one salad, please, because they have a salad at the carnival to punish the poor kids or the kids whose parents are cheap. And so anyway, it's like he wants money. And it does kind of like make a funny, muddled message. You know, these kids' movies often have like a message, right? Of like, money's not everything. And this one has a funny message in that it's like, you're sort of like, yeah, money's not everything. And I you know, you could probably walk away with that message, but you're like, I don't know. It kind of seemed like in Blank Check, what happens is a guy backs over his bike and then his bike is all fucked up. The guy has like just robbed a bank and so gives him a check but doesn't fill it out all the way. And so then the kid cashes the check, but he like uses very early 90s computer to like fill out the check for $1 million. And because the guy just robbed a bank and then I guess deposited $1 million in the bank in cash, the check clears and he's got like $1 million. It might have been less than $1 million. I don't know. But it was like a shitload of money, right? So then he buys a mansion. He's got water slides and stuff. He has a personal assistant. He's just fucking around having a great time. And then there's like a minor issue of like the criminals trying to come back and get the money back. And then, you know, some Home Alone antics ensue. And ultimately they get busted. The criminals get busted and the kid has to give the money back. But, you know, everyone's kind of like, eh. And so it seems like it really worked out for that kid. And so the lesson of that movie to me seemed to be, some parents are cheap assholes. And so if you get the opportunity to have some fun with some money, even if it's brief, yeah, why the fuck not? All right, next we have Gibby, Gibby capital Y, an iCarly spinoff. Noah Munch reprises his role as Gibby in the unaired pilot for Nick. The premise of the show would have been about Gibby getting a job at a recreational center where he ends up acting as a mentor to 4 offbeat middle school students. I like recreational center. I'm like, okay. Anyone on the planet call that a recreational center? A rec center. I almost couldn't say it just then. I knew what I was saying and almost couldn't. A recreational center. It's a center for recreation. Oh, I got it. See, this one doesn't have a great premise, in my opinion. There's a couple problems with this show. One is when you have middle school actors, you know what I mean? They're not going to look the same in 40 minutes. They grow up so fast. They grow up so fast that like by the time you film a fucking season, Stranger Things has seen this problem, right? You're like, the Stranger Things kids all look like they're in their 40s now. You're like, yeah, I mean, I know they're supposed to be in like middle school or high school or something. And you're like, I don't know, man. I grew up in the era of Zach Morris being a high school student or like Jason Priestley being a high school student. But everybody in that, you know, here's the key, right? What they should do in the new season of Stranger Things, you know, if it's not too late to go back and change this, guys, maybe use an artificial intelligence of some kind. You should start saying that like the adults in the show are actually like in their 70s. And then you're like, okay, so this is just a relative weird thing where no one looks the actual age they're supposed to. Or no, I'm sorry. You should say the parents are in their early 20s, right? What's her face? Lydia. Winona Ryder. Winona Ryder is 22, right? And everyone's talking about it, and she's like, well, I've only been able to drink for the last year. And you're like, I guess everyone just looks a lot older than their actual age. Stranger things have happened. That's what that title means, right? So if you do that, you're like, I don't know, something happened in the Upside Down, fucked everything up. Next we have Better Days, a That's So Raven spinoff. A lot of spinoffs. When Allison Stoner guest starred on the show, the episode was treated as a test pilot for a new show. It would star Allison as Allie. Wow. A child actress. Wow. Who needs to navigate her life between starring in a sitcom and going to high school. It's funny that this is like such a common theme among these shows because it's not, I don't think it's relatable. Maybe kids don't want a relatable show. Maybe they're more like, no, this is cooler. Like to imagine being famous is more fun. Is this why people want to be famous now? Like not for a specific thing. Like if you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up, they're like famous as opposed to like a scientist. I don't know. Kids these days, right? I just like, it's just an odd thing to have been tried so many times. You know what I mean? Maybe that's why none of these worked, because they were like, we're kind of over the whole, like, what if a celebrity had to go to school? For me, if I was a kid watching that, like a teen watching that, I would be like, oh, fuck off. Like, you don't have real problems. It's like, oh, Hannah Montana can't find a date for the prom. And it's like, welcome to everybody else's world, biatch. That's not fair. That's not fair to her. But you know what? Disney Channel put us all in this position. Not me. It's them. It's the goddamn mouse. Next we have What's Stevie Thinking? A Lizzie McGuire spinoff. I have seen Lizzie McGuire before. To my memory, it was a show about a girl who, that's it. That's all I got. Did something. She had like maybe a blog or something. I don't know, something like that. A show based on Stephanie Sanchez, the younger sister of Miranda Sanchez, starring Selena Gomez. The show would have been about the Sanchez family moving to Australia to help support wildlife conservation at a zoo. Stevie would also have had an animated persona to voice her inner thoughts like the original Lizzie character. Oh, that's a thing that happened on that show, huh? You know what? At least this one is like it's a swing. You know what I mean? It's like, well, they're doing something. They're at a zoo. There'd be animals. That's a thing. My prediction is many animals along the lines of, I don't know, a horse or something. Animals that kids could be around, kid actors could be around. Not like a chimp that's going to tear a kid's face off or something like that. Or maybe just a whole bunch of chimps. And, once they reach that age, that puberty where they go nuts, then it's like, well, throw them on the burn pile and bring out a new most valuable primate. We'll get them on the show. Next, we have Bus Life with, again, Vanessa Hudgens. I don't know who Vanessa Hudgens is. Doesn't matter. Jennifer Stone, Moises Arias, Brandon Michael Smith, and Kaisley Collins in the Disney Channel original. It would be based on a UK series that took place entirely on a school bus and was about all the hijinks that happened to and from school. See, I like this idea. What appeals to me about this is the cheapness of it. Because you're like, well, you basically only need one set, right? It would also probably have been very funny to look back at and be like, look at the shitty effects they did to make it seem like this bus was going somewhere. But I guess if you had one bus, you know what I mean? It seems like a solid idea. And it has kind of an element to it that I like. It's like watching the show 24. Where it's like, I guess like a ride to school on the bus, probably about 22 minutes. And, that would make sense for each episode. Like, this would be, so far of the shows, the one I would be like the most interested in. Like, if they were like, will you write for this show? I'd be like, I feel like I could come up with ideas. And then here's the other great thing about the premise. Every once in a while, you do a couple episodes where they're not on the bus. You know what I mean? And you're like, it's automatic production value because people are like, holy shit, they're not on the bus. And then these kid actors can be scarred for life because they're like, every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that goddamn bus. I see those yellow walls again. Next is The Odd Cousins. The show was supposed to star Allie and AJ Machaca, but then when they weren't available, Disney tried to get Vanessa Hudgens. It's centered on two cousins. One was a sunny, bright cheerleader, and the other, well, let me guess, bookworm type. The other was emo and grungy. They both find a way to live together. I guess at this point, it had been, half a generation or so since like the Olsen twins did all that shit. Where it's like these two twins, but here's the twist. They're twins. They look identical. One of them, though, bookworm type. Another one, party animal. How will they get along? And it's like, I don't know, man. Like the way all siblings get along, which is like great when they're little kids, then horribly for their, preteen and teenage years. And then, in their 20s and stuff, they're like, oh, that dude's all right. You know what I mean? It's really not that exciting. I don't know. Maybe other families are more dramatic that way. I've never experienced that either, I guess. A family where it's like the one kid is like all this and the other kid's all that way. I was like, my brother did a lot of jazz band and drama and stuff, and I just did nothing. I was a blank slate for everyone else to put their hopes and dreams upon. How'd that work out for you, assholes? Next we have Growing Up and Down, starring Noah Centineo, Rainy Rodriguez, and Adam Irigoyen. Set to air on Disney Channel, the show is centered on two high schoolers whose parents are turned into 14-year-olds and must attend school with their teen kids. I'm suspicious that this was the one that made me interested in this. This is like both a great and a terrible idea. You know what I mean? Because you're like, okay, here's the main problem with it is like, you basically have to go one note, right? Because the show is for those 14-year-olds watching. So the parents have to be the biggest fucking idiots of all time. You know what I mean? They have to go to math class and be like, I don't know how to do this stuff. You know what I mean? And then, I don't know, everyone in the class comes to like them because they're like, your cousin from out of state has a cool retro style. You know what I mean? He knew how to put a record on the record player. And then he complained about the origins of podcasts and, how early episodes of most podcasts are really boring. It is like my literal nightmare to like wake up. I read this book called 50 in Reverse. I don't know if I even talked about that one either. It seems like there have been a lot of holes in my reading, my listing of my reading. But if I didn't talk about it, basically this guy wakes up, he was, 50, and he wakes up in junior high. And he's reliving junior high and stuff. So, there's some things, he does some things. He joins a band and is like basically just playing songs because he knows how to play some songs. But, he's like, well, let's see. Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run is coming out in a couple months, so I'll just beat him to it by a couple weeks. And then he does that. He does a lot of things like that. But it's also kind of a hell. You know what I mean? Because he's like, I want to be with my family and the life I have and so on and so forth. And I don't know if I'll ever get back. And he's trying to think how to make sure that he ends up with his wife again, which is kind of sweet. But what's, the weirdest part is like at some point, a bad girl, a tough girl starts kind of coming on to him, starts doing some touching on him. And he's like, oh, no, thanks. You know what I mean? Because he's like, I'm 50 years old and you're like 14 and this is bad. Which is good. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want it to be not that. But maybe it wasn't as much, repulsion as I was hoping for. But also the book is kind of working in a way of like, is he actually 50 or is he crazy? You know what I mean? And like, there's complications. I would not say the book is like it's fine to be attracted to 14-year-olds. I'm saying the book, I guess, you can't be repulsed enough by that. So, whatever. Point being, that becomes a little difficult, right? You could see how you would end up writing a lot of things and you'd be like, what about when they're going to prom? And you're just like, mom and dad are not going to prom. They could, okay. Well, here's the really gross question. Mom and dad turn 14 again. So for some reason they start going to fucking school, which that makes no sense. This is the best scenario I can think of for homeschooling. This is the best thing I could think of if someone was like, why do you homeschool your kids? And they're like, well, actually, because our kids were cursed by a Romany woman who they hit with their car. And she's not cursing them because she's of that descent, but it just happens that she also does curses and stuff. These are unrelated in my estimation. And basically they've been made 14 again. So, and they don't want to just hang out with 14-year-olds all day. It would be the best reason to do homeschooling. But so I guess mom and dad could go to the prom together, right? Because you'd be like, well, they're not really with a 14-year-old, but then they kind of are. You know what I mean? And then you're like, I'm just picturing, okay. I'm picturing like, when I went to some high school dances, with friends. You know what I mean? People I was not romantically affiliated with at any point. But, of course, many times you would pop a rod because you're like 16 and that just happens. I think like I went to a prom with a friend and we slow danced and stuff. And I think it was literally the entire prom. And I have no idea to this day if she just didn't notice, like if I managed to, I don't think it was visually clear. And I was like, I'm going to keep my suit jacket on, Oh, I don't know. I think it looks cool. And in reality, I was like, I need this flap of fabric to hide that I have a boner. But I don't know whether she just didn't say anything or didn't notice. But either way, what a champ she was to not just be like, we can't dance anymore. She wouldn't have been wrong. She would not have been wrong to have said that. You know what I mean? And I was like, look, this is not in my head. I'm saying this. I'm like, look, this is not me being like, I'm reading more into this than it really is. I was like, it's like if I was sneezing because you wore a perfume. I just cannot help it. Anyway, what if that happened to dad? And he's dancing with 14-year-old mom. And then she's like, oh my God, what does this mean for your attraction? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. You see how this goes to a dark place really fast. Maybe this is like the exact discussion they had. I doubt it, but maybe. Next, we have Madison High, a high school musical spinoff. Starring Allison Reed, who reprises her role as Ms. Darbus and centered on the students in the high school where she takes on a new job. The original cast included G. Hennelius, who went on to star on Dog with a Blog? No. Hold on. Dog with a Blog, American comedy series. Somebody at Film Inquiry said, I spent my quarantine binging Blog with a Dog with a Blog. Oh no, Beth Littleford. Oh man, you deserve better. Let's see. Dog with a Blog. Premise. Set in Pasadena, California. No one gives a fuck where it's set. Avery Jennings' mother, Ellen, had just married Tyler and Chloe James's father, Bennett, so now the new family needs to make some adjustments on living together. They face an even bigger adjustment when they discover that their new dog, Stan, can talk. Really buried the lead pretty deep here. It's halfway down the section. I don't care that they live in fucking Pasadena. I don't care that they're a blended family. when you find out your dog can talk, you know what I mean? And someone's like, so how's things at home? You're not like, we're adjusting to the new family or whatever. No, you say, we discovered that our dog, Stan, can talk. Only Avery, Tyler, and Chloe know this. Unbeknownst to the family, Stan also, because you have to hide that from your parents for some reason. You know what I mean? Because what if they found out the dog could talk? Unbeknownst to the family, Stan also has a blog where he discusses happenings in the Jennings James household in hopes of finding other talking animals. Oh, God. He's like having a crisis. The children learn of Stan's talking ability in the first episode and agree to keep it a secret from their parents, fearing if the world finds out Stan can talk, he will be taken away for experimentation. I mean, that's dumb, but whatever. Why would they find out? Why would they find that out? You know what I mean? What? Boy. Dog with a blog. I mean, the title rhymes so well. I'm highly suspicious that Dog with a blog was had something, the rhyming of the title. It almost seems like something someone came up with. So they're laying in bed and they're like, dog with a blog. You know what I mean? And then they're like, wait a minute. Okay. A, it's hilarious. The whole premise is hilarious, but B, kind of sad that this dog is just like, I cannot be the only dog who's capable of this, right? So maybe I'll reach out on internet and, find other dogs and probably just end up finding a bunch of furries all the time. Next, we have Forever Boys. Dog with a blog. Forever Boys, a supernatural pilot starring boy band Forever in Your Mind as brothers who were bitten by a vampire in 1957 and reemerged as a band after decades in hiding, was ordered by Disney Channel but never saw the light of day. Not the worst premise I've ever heard. Not because it sounds like a great show, but because at least you're like, I mean, vampires, that's a thing, right? And then, I guess a vampire boy band. You know what I mean? It's like a one phrase pitch. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah. And then you're like, actually that does work on the level of like, they would be forever young. They will stay forever young. So, that's a positive. That's actually, I think that's the movie. I think that's your A24 version. You get like a Lou Pearlman type guy, and he's vampirizing a bunch of teen boys so that they can stay young and be the band forever. You know what I mean? And then they're cycling, right? It's like this same kids were New Kids on the Block, and then they were a band in the mid 2000s, and then they were another boy band in Korea. You know what I mean? Just keep running the same game the whole time. You're like, oh, they're actually all fucking vampires. Gulliver Quinn, starring Sabrina Carpenter, John Heder, Sam Adler, Joey Bragg for Disney Channel, based on a 28-year-old man who returned to suburbia after living in a cave with his animal researcher parents since 7th grade. He goes back to middle school in order to graduate. Okay, so caveman George of the Jungle combined with Billy Madison, huh? I mean, that's a pretty fucking dumb idea, right? Also, I don't think 7th grade is like enough. You know what I mean? I think if you lived in the real world until 7th grade, until you were 28, so what's 7th grade? Like fucking 14, 12, something like that. I feel like if you lived in the real world until you were 12 and then lived in a cave like a caveman. I mean, this is Encino Man, right? And we should just do the same thing. No one cares how the caveman got there, right? The whole point is what happens to this caveman now that he's back. You know what I mean? That's all we care about. It's like a body swap movie, a Freaky Friday or the Pee in the Fountain movie. They both pee in the same fountain and that's how they switch, which is probably my favorite because I'm like, that's fucking stupid, but also every way they switch is stupid because you can't do a body swatch thing that makes sense because body swapping doesn't make sense. So like, it's dumb. A caveman being in today is dumb. There's no way you can make it not dumb. So just be as expedient as possible. So we don't, you know what I mean? Do a Mystery Science Theater type of intro. He was living in a cave for the last several years. La, la, la. And then, you know. And then use a verse to basically be like, listen, if you got a bunch of fanboy bullshit questions you want to ask, keep it to your goddamn self. That show was genius, man. Like, even before the internet, they were like, if you want to know, like, all the science behind this, it's not goddamn Star Trek, okay? Shut the fuck up. I would love to do a different version of Mystery Science Theater thing. In the theme song, we would just change. On one episode, we would change it, and it's like, if you're wondering how they eat and breathe and other science facts, la, la, la. And then I just break in, and I'm just like, shut the fuck up. Okay? If you're wondering those things, you're not unique. That's not that's not an original thought. Shut the fuck up. Just angry. Just me poorly, zoomed in, Microsoft Teams with a webcam built into a laptop, just going, shut the fuck up. Let's see. Then we've got our final one, Zombies and Cheerleaders, starring Maya Mitchell and John DeLuca. Focused on Maya's character, Addison, a newbie cheerleader who meets a fellow student played by Luke Benward, who also happens to secretly be a zombie. It was later reworked and became DCOM Zombies? Okay. I really dislike this kind of stuff, and I'll tell you why. I feel like most things that have a zombie like that, where they're like, well, this kid in school's a zombie. The problem is it violates the entire sort of premise of what zombies is. In other words, it's like, it'll be a zombie, but he can like think and talk and, basically is in no way a zombie. And so you're like, well, if he's in no way a zombie, you know what I mean? If there's no actual effect of him being a zombie, then who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? Like, why would I care? I don't care about that. All right. That's going to do us for today, everybody. Thank you for listening to another episode of Helpful Snowman Radio. You can visit our website at helpfulsnowman.com. There I have so many things for you. I have so many things to show you. You can give me money in various ways. You could buy a book that I've written. You could look up a book that I've written as though you're going to buy it, and then probably type the name of that book into Internet Archive and find the same goddamn thing. You could do other stuff, I'm sure. You know what I mean? You could listen to old episodes of this show. Amazing Spider webcast came roaring back last week. We'll see if we get in as many episodes as we did last year, which was 4. And so far this year, we've gotten in 1. So, we're on a pretty bad track to make that happen, but it's not impossible. So, think about heading over there and giving me money in one way or another, or I don't know what else you would really do there. You could just kind of see what else is going on, but it doesn't really matter. All right. We'll see you next time.
Somebody should talk about 2 times.